Hey, I'm Naomi Hall, and I want to welcome you to Mindset Makeover, Finding Your Power Through Fitness, Nutrition, and Community. And my whole heart behind this is that we know what to do when it comes to healthy living, but we struggle to do it. And a lot of that comes down to our mindset and the community piece. And so today I have with me Ryan Bean. And Ryan is, hold on, I have his bio here. Ryan is a yogi, a Navy veteran that has been teaching yoga for 15 years, author, Tedx speaker, and breath worker. He is certified in Yogic Pranayama, Wim Hof Method, the Language of Breath Collective co-founder, Psychedelic Assisted Therapy guide, and founder of Ketamine Breathwork. Ryan is a meditation and mindfulness trainer and retreat leader. And Ryan is also the host of a mindful topics-based podcast, Life as an Observer. So Ryan, welcome.
Whoa, thank you. Well done. My intro.
Nice.
It never gets old hearing it a little bit. I'm like, I get asked all the time, what is it that you do, in quotation marks? What is it that you do? And as though I'm supposed to be identifying with my job. And usually I just say that I'm a creator because that's really kind of where my life has led me to, is being a creator. When I kind of gave up corporate life many years ago and moved to India, I said I wanted to be of service and I want to create opportunities and just kind of let that go where it goes. And I didn't know what that meant at the time. And I don't know that I still necessarily can define it, but it's constantly flowing. So there's lots of things that come into my experience, like writing books and speaking on podcasts and so forth, that just kind of show up. And it's just because of being of service and creating the life that I want to live.
Yeah, I think that goes hand in hand, that life of generosity and giving and the opportunities that come up.
Yeah.
And I also want to thank you for your service. I appreciate that. So thank you. We are going to talk about mindset, but I'm sure there are some people that either read your bio or just heard it, and they heard the words ketamine and psychedelics, and there may be some resistance there, and mindset obviously deals with resistance. So let's just address that right out of the gate of like, is this guy like legit? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, I do get that a lot, and especially in what we would call a psychedelic renaissance, where people are hearing more about different options that could be legal, or we'll say sort of in the loopholes of legality for working in mindset. And the ketamine is a legal anesthetic. It's been since 1971, I believe. And just recently, in about 2019, it was approved for mental health in its S form. Now, we do use the S and R forms in many different ways in what we call an off-label, but ketamine is a legal anesthetic, and it is used in the right dosages on a sub-anesthetic dose for psychedelic sessions to create a disruption in patterns, if you will. So we call it a kind of dissociative chemical or a component to help those disassociate from maybe their physical experience or even their mental experience in kind of a theta brainwave form, meaning when you're kind of taking a dream, you're in sleep state and you can disassociate, but it feels very real, but yet you can sort of remove yourself from that. And there's some science that I can jump into if we want to do that, but how that works and why ketamine. I mean, we hear a lot about kind of the recreational side of psychedelics a lot. You see it in whatever documentaries with acid, LSD from the 60s, and mushrooms, which are kind of finding their therapeutic usages. We're also hearing a lot about DMT or dimethyltryptamine that comes through ayahuasca journeys and other forms of DMT. And many of them have their benefits. Ketamine just happens to be the only one currently which is FDA approved, and we would like to change that in the near future, because it is all these are helping people in a clinical setting. And I have to sort of emphasize that, in a clinical setting where the dosages are right and they're being guided in a way to make real changes that are safe. So usually you would do those under the advisory of a we have nurse practitioners and physicians assistants in here, or therapists who would guide you in that journey space, and then include things like integration. So these medicines are really great for things like anxiety, stress, even depression. And ketamine specifically is kind of, we find to be the best psychedelic for those who are having suicidation, who are really thinking about ending their life. It just disrupts the pattern almost immediately, and literally within hours. And it disrupts the pattern to where that suicide ideation is no longer present, and allows new thoughts and new things to come in. And this process of changing those is called neuroplasticity. So we're changing the way that the neurons are firing and what's happening between the neurons, which are, it's called the synapse. And so in between there, what's happening in there, what messages are being sent through this process.
Okay. Wow. So that's a totally different, like when you have in your mind and you think about like ketamine and psychedelics, like you said, like there's this kind of recreational information that we get about it. And I think that's kind of where people think of these things, but you're looking at a very clinical setting, very controlled, it's FDA approved, and there's a process that people are going through with the use of ketamine, right?
Right. So there's lots of different delivery methods of ketamine specifically. The traditional, I mean, traditional is kind of an odd word because it's only been around since about 2019, but traditional delivery method has been through infusion, so an IV. And that particular method does work really well. And particularly, it's usually dosed in about a 0.5 milligram per kilogram per person. And that is usually about a 2-hour session. And most clinics around, at least in the United States, offer a protocol of 6 sessions, which usually is over a 3-week period. Now, we do things a little bit differently here at my clinic in Utah, where we don't necessarily stack them up that quickly. However, ketamine doesn't necessarily, it disrupts patterns on the first time, but it takes several sessions usually for that to be a long-lasting, lifelong change. So we do recommend more than one session. Under the advice of a therapist like myself, or one of the nurses, we do advise that. However, we do other delivery methods here, and there is an intramuscular method. There is also a sublingual method, in which I created a trademark on, called ketamine breathwork. And we have to kind of know a little bit of the science to understand it. But basically, when you do an intramuscular or an intravenous of a psychedelic, it bypasses the liver and the metabolic process, if you will. Well, when you put something in your mouth, it has to go through the liver and the stomach, and so we lose some of the potency, if you will. They call it bioavailability of that. Well, my partner, an anesthesiologist here, he said, hey, can we figure out a way to make a sublingual application a little bit more bioavailable? How do we make it so that we get more medicine, reduce the cost by using an oral medication rather than an IV, and also make it maybe even a better experience, and make it scalable? So meaning, psychedelics have been used in group settings for a long time, ages. I mean, if we really go back into history, psychedelics through mushrooms and maybe even other types of fungi have been used in ceremonial settings, including that of ayahuasca and those in those tribes in South America. And psychedelics here have either been done recreationally or clinically, one-on-one. Well, we wanted to find a way to make them to where we could have them as group settings, and it's scalable and so forth, like what I just said. So I took what I know about breath work. I said, okay, well, I know when the body is in a sympathetic dominant state, when we're breathing in a way where we're creating more, higher up, the heart rate goes up, we're creating more of a faster breath, certain things happen. The mind begins to sort of respond via the nervous system, saying, okay, I'm in the sympathetic dominant state. I think I'm being chased by a lion or whatever, and I'm getting worried and stressed. Well, when that happens, your body produces something called cortisol, and it also produces adrenaline. Well, in doing so, this is the initiation of some of the autonomic or automatic processes that are in the the body. Some of those are like digestion, reproductive systems, the eyes dilating. There's a whole bunch of processes that happen that we are not in control of. No one's pushing those buttons to say, okay, digest now. You are, your unconscious being, your unconscious self is doing that. And it's a very automatic. Well, when you breathe in that way, you inhibit digestion to conserve energy. Something I talk about in my TED Talk is that conservation of energy is to really help keep you alive, just in case you really are in trouble. Mm-hmm. So by inhibiting digestion, we get a more potent sublingual application of this ketamine, increasing the bioavailability from, again, we have to get some more biomarkers to know exactly what it is, because each person is going to be different based on what they've eaten and how they participate in the breath work. But anywhere, it was about 20% bioavailability. And we've increased that from anywhere to 50% to 90% bioavailability based upon the activity in which they've done it. Meaning this ketamine, which, normally would be an IV or an intramuscular, which is, a little bit invasive, to where you can take it in a pill form. It's called a troche or troche, lozenge, if you will, and creating an experience where it can be more bioavailable. And why this is important is because there is a psychedelic component to changing the mind, if you will, if they're to resetting and changing patterns. So, many times we force ourselves to go to the gym, we force ourselves on a diet. We don't really want to, but we know we need to. And to really change your mind means taking a different path that says, I'm not doing it because I hate it, I'm going to force myself into it. There is some sort of ease that comes from this, or maybe a livelihood, or I feel better in my body, and you begin to notice that it feels that way. Well, there's the psychedelic piece of it, which is going to happen regardless. It's just going to be, you're going to have about 45 minutes of disassociation or an hour. Well, there's also a psycholytic state. This is a state when you're still kind of disassociated from your body. However, you can talk and you're kind of aware, but you're still sort of separate from whatever scenario has brought you here. We see a lot of religious trauma here in the clinic. We see a lot of abuse. We see a lot of addiction. We see a lot of things that have caused what we call PTSD, or traumas in people's bodies. And many times they don't know how to process them. But when a disassociated state happens, they can do that. So we do something called CAP, or ketamine assisted psychotherapy. And you can do that in a lower dosage state, which allows the participant to better navigate their experience. Even though there may still be emotions there, they're kind of seeing it as a third person. They're almost seeing their self as a third person in that way. And these are all on subanesthetic doses. An anesthetic dose would be where you're totally out. Ketamine, again, is quite safe. It's been used it was used to replace opiates in the Vietnam era. So they were using PCP as an anesthetic, and opiates, they don't allow you to breathe. So sometimes you have to have a ventilation and stuff when you're using those as anesthetics. Well, ketamine allows you to continue to breathe totally normally. And there is very little addictive qualities to it. There's not really much of a chance of overdose. So it's very safe. And that's why we use that as our psychedelic currently.
This is so interesting. I'm learning so much about this. And I have a science background, so like the science piece, I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. And yeah, you mentioned PTSD, and I know you do a lot of work with veterans on PTSD. So right. How do you work with that? Because there's some like deep psychological pieces there. And I know so my focus is very much in the wellness and health and fitness, and that even there can be some kind of PTSD associations and things. Sure. Of like big events that have caused some pretty strong reactions.
Well, I am a real believer that you can work on your body all day long, but if your mind isn't healthy, then you're still not healthy. Mm-hmm. And there are some unhealthy gym rats, and there's some unhealthy runners, and there's some unhealthy cyclists, and there's some people who are allowing their ego to determine how healthy they are. And really, the real work is within inside of us. I don't know that there's ever one perfect physique or perfect diet. It's really how we feel. And I learned that really when I was living in India, that, I changed my diet quite a bit and felt better. And, I used to be much of I was quite a lifter. And I said, no, I'm just going to do yoga now. And I do some acro yoga and I go paddleboarding and, those kind of things. And that's what brings me joy mentally, which makes me feel good physically. The way I look at myself feels better. So as it relates to what we do with veterans, yeah, there's a lot to unpack there with veterans, because each veteran is obviously has a different set of circumstances which led them to a place where they feel mentally ill. It could have been a trauma, it could have been just separation from family, it could have been, being in a battle. So I did 10 years in the Navy, and I suffered also from PTSD. And when I came back, I realized that I had this just zero desire to do anything. I didn't want to go to work. I didn't want to work harder. I just didn't want to do anything really. Really, I just wanted to be liked. And so I was going out every night of the week to be social, and I was drinking socially to have some sort of acceptance. And that just wasn't mentally healthy for me. So that's when I packed up and moved to India for a couple of years and kind of learned more about going deeper. And in our retreats, so I'm one of the founders of Visionary Veterans, and we host alternative medicine retreats. And when I say alternative medicine, it doesn't necessarily just mean psychedelic. Some of the things that we offer are things like sweat lodges and ice bathing and art therapy and dance and yoga. And we get into nature immersion. And there are some options with different medicines, but some of those medicines might be like a cacao. It might be, drinking tea ceremonies. It might be just eating healthier, foods and whole foods. And that's kind of what we teach. Now, we are doing a ketamine retreat for veterans in October here in Southern Utah. And that will be, that'll include some nature therapy. It'll include some ice bathing and sweat lodges and so forth. But it's not one size fits all for veterans, for law enforcement, first responders. If there's trauma there, it's not, here, take this thing and it'll make you feel better. It's, let's add this and see what binds. And that's kind of something that's really neat about ketamine, is ketamine doesn't necessarily heal you. And when people come into my clinic, that's where I am now, when they come into my clinic and they say, I want the ketamine because it's going to fix me, I tell them that they are way off base. That is not how it works. It doesn't work by saying, give me something and I'll feel better. And many people are used to, especially veterans, the kind of the model of like, here, take this drug, which is usually an SSRI, which is a serotonin reuptake inhibitor. Okay, so these are things like Paxils and different Wellbutrins and antipsychotics too. What it's doing is those are in the serotonin system, and in the synapse, it's holding that serotonin a little bit longer, which usually allows people to feel happiness, wellness, just for a little bit longer, which in turn might make them feel better and so forth. But the problem is you're on those for a lifetime. They come with a lot of contraindications. They come with a lot of things like you just don't want, these dry mouths and decrease in libido and just like a problem sleeping. Well, ketamine works in the glutamate system, and it's what's called an NMDA or NMDA antagonist. Okay, so which means basically it's a blocker of this particular chemical. Okay, so it gets blocked and it blocks it, which seems very interesting because we're trying to disrupt patterns and we're changing things. But in doing so, by blocking that, it almost takes a different path. It almost says, let's look for other telomeres. Let's look for other places, which is kind of what we're saying when we're saying change your path, change your journey, move this neuroplasticity, make changes. Well, it's kind of doing it for you because it's blocking. It's an antagonist. And it's saying, nope, we're not going to go on the same patterns we've always done. And it immediately shifts it. That's why it works really good for suicide ideation. Well, in doing so, it doesn't necessarily stay that way, but what it does is it leads patients to kind of make a decision of lifestyle changes which support that psychedelic session. So someone may leave here and I give them homework. Usually that homework is daily breath work, and it is I invite them to yoga. I teach some yoga classes and I invite them. So, you need to have other things other than this one little session in hopes that it fixes you. And because that's not how it works. Do a session, do 2 sessions, do 3 sessions. But I'm going to tell you every time, do your breath work daily. Make sure you're making some lifestyle changes. Get out into nature and do that. So that's why these veterans retreats, we don't just say, here's some ketamine, go home. Because that's not going to fix them. They'll be back right where they were within a couple weeks. So we try to create lifestyle choices and routines that become habits, and then habits which then become that new person that they want to be.
You hit on so many things in there. And I love that you're talking about like creating routines to habits to lifestyle. So I think so many times we try to jump to the lifestyle of like, all right, I'm going to be a fit, healthy, nutritious food eating person. And we like do it for a day, a week, and fall off and think we're not successful. But you're looking at, let's start here and make small changes.
Right. Yeah, I think if I were to tell the audience what my routine is, they would say, I can't do that. There's no way. There's no way I could do that. But my routine has been built over many years of deciding what works for me. And my routine starts early in the morning and several hours. And that is how I start my day, because then I can show up as the person I want to be. When I don't do that, I feel it. And I was teaching a health and wellness course in Florida at a university there and in Central Florida. And one of the things that I told the students, if they want to make any changes in their life, just one little thing, and they don't look at your phone after 9 p.m. or before 9 a.m. Like, just make that conscious choice. Just one choice, because you'll find not only are you starting your day with momentum, because how many times do we pick up our phone and go, oh, bad news, or ooh, I'm stuck here, or I can't sleep, and so you're scrolling, right? And so you make these choices which then affect other parts of your life. So if you could do one thing, well, just put that down, put a boundary on yourself. And I mean, a boundary on others also. Like, I don't have my ringer on ever. It doesn't ring. My phone doesn't ring. And so if you want to get a hold of me, you have to kind of text me and say, I'm going to want to call you and talk to you. And I do that because I know that if I'm constantly looking at my phone, then I'm going to be taken away from things that are my passions, that I'm interested in and that I'm focused on, rather than what is a distraction. So that is one thing that people can do, is just say, I'm going to create a boundary when it comes to my devices. And then you can say things like, okay, well, I'm going to use my device for things that build me up now. And I have a couple of different apps that I'm on that we do breath work and meditation. You can say, you know what, I will open up my phone for this thing. I'll do it for that. Or, you get believe it or not, they still make actual alarm clocks. You can buy one. You don't need your phone. You can actually buy an actual alarm clock and let it ring for you, So that was one of the things that I taught. And then start to add the things that make sense in your routine, because my routine may not be good for, like, you may not doesn't fit with what I got, because people have kids, or they have a job that starts earlier, or they have other things, and they have to do it in a way that makes sense. So don't force anything. I think the more that we force what we would call a healthy lifestyle, the more we resent the healthy lifestyle. The more we find joy in that, and we say, this is what brings me happiness, is the more we begin to enjoy it. For instance, my partner is not as big into yoga as I am. She likes to go dancing. That's her movement. She's like, I want to go dancing. That is my release. I like dancing too, but not as much as she does. So we have different things that suit us in the way of somatically releasing through our body. And for me, it just happens to be yoga. And for her, it happens to be dancing. So forcing something and saying, this will change you, is probably not accurate. And that's the same thing as we were saying with veterans, not one size fits all.
I love that. And I talk about that with my clients of like, let's find joyful movement for you. Let's make this enjoyable. Yeah. It shouldn't be like, and I also talk about when it comes to nutrition, like this shouldn't be a life of deprivation. If there are foods that you love, like we need to find ways that you can include foods that you love. Like, I'm not giving up chocolate. Like, that's not a healthy lifestyle for
Yeah.
me. That's something I like. So I'm going to find ways to include that in my life. And I also love that you said, like, basically, none of this is absolutely prescriptive. Like, it's try this. Does this fit your lifestyle? Does this fit your routine? And I think that's so important, because I think we look at things sometimes and think it has to be this because that's what this person does.
Yeah, yeah. There's a poet. His name is Young Pueblo. I'm going to paraphrase him because I'm not got it really, but he says something along the lines of, "When we notice tension in our mind without judgment and without reacting to it, that's when real healing begins." And so, something like our diet, when we can say, that's not really what I want to do, and I can make changes without judgment and without, really being frustrated with it. I just notice the tension and saying that doesn't feel good, so I'm going to move towards what feels good. That's when we really become healing. I'll give you an example. As I woke up the other day with this like sense of like dread, it's a heavy word, but it was just like, what is going on? But instead of reacting to it, going into a full blown attack or just being like, I'm just shutting down, going into a depressive state, I said, let me sit with this for a minute. Let me notice it. Let me not judge it, not judge myself. Am I depressed? Am I sad today? What's going on? Just kind of sitting with it, and realized that it was just, I had a buildup of a lot of different things, and I had to set some boundaries with a few people and events. I had to set a few boundaries so that I could find my own joy in those days. Well, the same is true with what we eat or how we exercise. If you wake up and you're like, I don't want to do it, don't do it. Doesn't mean like long term don't do it, but find something that brings you joy, joyful movement, joyful breath, meditation, reading, whatever brings you joy will feel better than doing nothing. So just whatever it is that brings you joy. And if you're saying, well, I don't know what brings me joy. Well, that's interesting. That's kind of an amazing place to be in, because that means you get to be an explorer. You get to try everything. You get to say, I'm going to try it. I'm going to try it. I'm going to try it. And kind of full circle back to ketamine. That's sort of what it does. It opens that gateway to saying, I have all these possibilities where I've been locked into this set of, call it, the analogy we use and at least I use in the clinic is, maybe you've been skiing or so after it hasn't snowed in a while and there's little ruts, kind of like in the back country, if you will, and not really on the groomed paths, but on, there's little ruts, and you sort of just follow that, and you have to stay there, otherwise you're kind of get lost in the trees or whatever. But when you get a fresh coat of powder, it gives you this ability to kind of create your own path, if you will. You can say, I can jump off this. I don't need to stay in the ruts. I can sort of swim around in the snow, and I can, make my own path. Well, that's really what a psychedelic session is. It's a reset saying, I've been stuck in these ruts, and now I have so many possibilities. And I think even just lifestyle changes in general kind of open us up to that. There was a time in my life where I really wanted to surf a whole lot. And living in Florida, there is a little surfing there, but it's not the greatest surfing in the world. Let's just be real. So I was doing my postdoc degree there in school in Central Florida, and I didn't really want to surf because it was a drive to the beach. I didn't really enjoy it. I was finding frustration driving to the beach and finding there was no waves. And I got into wakeboarding. And wakeboarding changed everything for me because there's thousands of lakes in Florida. And it just changed everything, where I was able to find joy in a new way, just being on the water. So, those who are looking for a healthy lifestyle change, they're like, I hate running. I hate going to the gym. Well, what is it that you enjoy doing? Maybe it's paddleboarding. Maybe it's just rowing. Maybe it's swimming. There are so many possibilities.
Yeah.
There's so many possibilities to being healthy for you. And healthy doesn't look like any Instagram models. Healthy doesn't look like anything you see. It's what you feel. And if you feel good, then you are healthy. If you don't feel healthy, then you're not going to be. That's why it really starts with the mind. And if there's some blockages in the mind, disrupting them through altered states of consciousness is helpful. And there's so many different altered states of consciousness. They don't have to necessarily be psychedelic. They could be, breathwork is a nice good one. Fasting is another really good one. Sweat lodge is another one. Ice bathing is another one. These are all altered states of consciousness that shift our brain waves into a way of either a fight or flight response, which is creating sympathetic dominance. And then we, with our mind saying, I'm okay, I'm doing this, I'm participating in this, and we down regulate, teaching our mind that in those times of stress, in those times when we're communicating with our unconscious self chemically. So your unconscious self doesn't know English. It just knows how you feel, chemicals and frequencies. And when you move into places that feel good, you begin to produce chemicals like melatonin, and you begin to feel serotonin. Cortisol sort of fades away. Cortisol is our stress hormones, and we start to feel this serotonin where we're feeling happy, and we're like, oh, cool. Don't know where that's coming from, but these are our molecules that our body produces endogenously, and sometimes it requires us to get them out, outside of ourselves, but we can come back to equanimity and begin to self-regulate through things that bring us joy.
I love that. So one of the movements that I find joy in is martial arts. I found it after my doctorate because, when you're doing your doctorate, there's not much else you're doing, especially if you're working. So I was like trying to come back to reintegrating into life, and I found martial arts. And so one of the things you mentioned earlier in talking about the work that you do with veterans is tea ceremonies. So there's a lot of ceremony in the martial arts of respect and different things like that. So can you touch a little bit on tea ceremonies and that, and how you use that? Because that just intrigues me.
Well, the tea itself is, hate to say it, but that's not really the special part of it, right? I mean, it could be any tea, really. It doesn't necessarily need to be one specific tea. I mean, it could even be cacao, which is really nice. That really has a heart opening kind of feel when you drink cacao, it's in its raw form and its bitterness. But in tea ceremonies in general, there's something, especially for those who identify with their masculine a lot, to softening that. And a lot of the tea ceremonies that you may go to have like a jasmine foot wash at the beginning. You're getting this little bit of nurturing and somebody loving you, washing your feet, which is really interesting. Then you come in and there is this methodical process of not just ingesting the tea, just sipping on it, and there it is. That's a lot of how Westerners are anyway, right? Get your food, you have your lunch break, go out there and get the food, come back, and you don't really even digest it. You're just like, and then we wonder why we have GI issues, right? Because we are eating this food that has very little nutrition and very little time, and we're in a sympathetic dominant state when we do it. Well, when you're holding the tea and you're receiving it kind of as a gift, and you're smelling the tea, and you're kind of opening up your senses, and then maybe you're sort of just tasting it into the palate, and then it's infused with others in the community. We'll say their energy that's infused with the person offering the tea. Maybe there's some meditation or even song that's associated with that. There's a frequency, and like I said, we speak with ourselves in frequency and chemical, and that frequency radiates in certain areas in our chakra system, if you will. So, and a lot of those may be at different frequencies to manifest with, say, root chakra for safety and health, or maybe you might have a tea that's specifically blended for that of your sacral chakra to help with reproduction and creativity. Maybe it's in the heart, and you're looking for areas, a tea that maybe has a frequency in those leaves for that of forgiveness, or throat chakra. You have throat teas, right? So those, your throat chakra, maybe you have something that's specifically designed for that. Well, not only are you creating intention around why you're there, I'm here because I'm feeling this, and I'm identifying it. That's awareness, which is the foundation of our change, just being aware of what you need, and then being methodical and really present. And I think there's so many teachers out there that talk about being present, being in the now, be here now. And these vibrations that emanate from this ceremony are not only, they're not just temporary. This is how we remember things. So anything that's happened in your life, let's say it's been a trauma or it's been a happiness, it had an emotion associated with it that for you to remember it. If there was no emotion associated with it, you probably have forgotten it. It's just sort of back in the back of the neocortex. Well, when we have an emotion that comes with this, whether it be through feeling it in our chakra system, or when we do breath work, we tend to move into our limbic mind, where the limbic mind is places of like our hippocampus, the hypothalamus, and the amygdala, which sort of are our emotional or fear centers.
Mhm.
So that part of the mind then feels it again. So when you smell that tea another time, or you think about that tea,
Mhm.
you come back to the emotion that you felt when you felt nurtured, cared for, and loved in that tea ceremony. And that's why they're so powerful. We're not just drinking tea, we are creating an emotional connection to a time when we felt loved, supported, and nurtured.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is really, really neat. So we're creating an emotional connection. Wow. Um, and so then one more piece I want to touch on with that is you're not doing a tea ceremony by yourself,
No.
right? Like there's this community aspect to it. So can you touch on the community piece?
Yeah, so for the most part of a tea ceremony, you would be pretty quiet. But again, you feel everyone's like energy. It's like being in regardless of religious beliefs, but you're in a prayer circle, you're in a drum circle, you're in a meditation room. You are connected energetically to everything that's going on in that room. When we have group ketamine sessions, I mean, if someone has an emotional release, I mean, there may be others who feel it, even though they're disassociated, they feel that. Think about a time when you may have walked into a room where a couple was having an argument. Can you
Mm.
feel that they were having an argument? Yeah. You don't hear it, you don't, but you can feel that energy shift, that something frequency wise has made a shift.
Mhm.
And that shift is then affecting you. You're
Mhm.
sensing it, and then you think about it, and then it becomes part of your vibration where you want to get the heck out of there, right?
Mhm.
Well, at a tea ceremony, a cacao ceremony, any kind of ritual, most of the time, those ceremonies are going to be done in group sessions for the most part. Ceremony has been done from indigenous peoples thousands and thousands of years. You can read about ceremonies in the Bhagavad Gita, which is 5,000 years old, the Upanishads. You can read about them in the Bible. You can read about all these different ceremonies that have happened. And I think a lot of it is because we are, for the most part, tribe dwelling people. Humans are. We thrive in those environments. And after I'm going to place a date. We'll say after World War II, we started to move into this nuclear unit of civilization where we came away where people used to live with their parents on land and groups, and we'd have tribes that lived together and villages who were very close. And then we turned into this nuclear unit where we have subdivisions and we don't even know our neighbors,
Mm.
and we live in these grand cities and we don't really even know who lives next to us for the most part, and we're so separated. Well, ceremony brings us back to getting to know and appreciate the human isness of us all, because really when you come into close contact in those ways through ceremony, you realize we're all the same. There's not, you know, if you're in an ayahuasca ceremony and the person next to you is a very wealthy businessman, doctor, lawyer, whatever, and you happen to be, a retail clerk, you all throw up just the same. Okay, you all have the same emotions. You still have the same sadness. You still have the same stuff. And we realize that it's not about our social status or who we think we are.
Mm.
It's really who we are. So it's going beyond this personality, this facade of I am this. And so you must be that, when I'm in the clinic, I can certainly take on that. I am the therapist. You are the coming for therapy. And I can have this interaction where we believe each other. But the real truth is when I sit with patients, I become a student also. You
Mm.
become a listener also. You become an observer also. And in doing so, it humbles you to the experience. So when we get into group ceremonies with the intent of observing, be aware, it takes us away from our what we think is our human experience, having these spiritual moments, and turns us into a spiritual being that happens to be having a human experience.
Mm.
And we realize that we're more than just this suit.
Wow, that is really neat. I am a spiritual being in a human body. Um, I was just thinking as you're talking about that of like the ceremony, and it doesn't necessarily have to be I was thinking kind of beyond the tea ceremony as well of like the community, and when you started talking about like the nuclear units and that, of it used to be like you would have big family dinners, right? Of like all these people coming together. And some cultures still have that. I think of like some even within the US of like they have big family gatherings. And that's that reminder of we're not alone. We have this community. And like you said, we're human and we all have these experiences and I think you get to when you have some of those gatherings, like you get to see like, oh yeah, like we are all the same, aren't we? Like the realness comes out in people.
The realness comes out in people, but also the feeling of being all alone, where we think that we're in this all alone, where we say no one else can understand me.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know what I've been through, and these reasonings that we use because frankly we're embarrassed that we're not healthy. Okay, we're embarrassed that our mind isn't. So we make an excuse saying you wouldn't understand. I see this a lot in veterans. That's why we have veterans only retreats, so we can say, yeah, dude, been there. I get it. Totally there. I was there with you. And that's why, we're not trying to isolate one group or another, but there is something about putting people who have been through similar situations, bringing together and creating this sense of I am not alone, which gives them another reason to carry on. It says, you know what, somebody does get me. I see so many people who come into my clinic and say, I'm depressed and this is how I intend to take my life. And just because I don't see anything outside of this, I don't see anything getting better. And I'll say, well, that's an interesting place to be in. And I just without judgment, you just say that's just an interesting place to be in. Where would you like to see yourself? And they'll say, well, I don't know. I don't know. I just want to feel better. And for the most part, I can't make anyone feel better. I can't change that state. But what I can do is I can offer this sense of hope that sort of shows that there's something beyond their physical experience. That physical experience might be I'm just trying so hard, and if I try to work out really hard, then my body will feel better, and if I just eat better, but then I'm depressed, so then I eat worse, and I eat foods that make me feel better, and I'm in this constant cycle. And I could say, well, what feels good? What feels good is X, whatever that is. And we're like, okay, well, let's just focus on X right now. Let's just get to there. And let's create a community around that. So that's why I invite a lot of people to my yoga classes, because I teach a trauma-informed yoga. It's not hot power yoga where you have to perform at a faster, high level. It is yoga therapy where you're just simply tuning into the sacredness of your own body and what it can offer, not where you think it should be, but where it is. And it's a matter of inquiry. Like, what does it feel like if I raise my arm another inch? What would it feel like if I just came up on my fingertips? How would you feel if you closed your eyes and just felt your heels pushing into the ground? And that's to me a better way to tune someone back into community, is saying, let's just start with awareness. Let's start with awareness in the body. Let's start with awareness in the breath and move into a place where you feel supported by an entire community. And that particular class is quite full. And I don't know what everyone's going through in there. I'm not their therapist, but I know that they're there for a reason and they're hopefully getting what they need out of it. So I don't know what the end, the solution to all this is, but I will tell those who are listening and saying, maybe I'm identifying with that. Finding community of like-minded people is helpful. It is absolutely helpful. Just to finding a community of people who say, I'm not here to judge you. I'm going through the same stuff. And even if it's really uncomfortable to show up in a place, I mean, it might be a grief, group. It might be, someone, an addiction group. It might be a group for single mothers. I don't know what it is for you, but whatever it is, you'll find that people are there to support you. And if that first place doesn't work, go somewhere else. Don't think of that as the only option, because there are so many options. If you're in a small town, get on the internet, please. I mean, there's groups. If you're in a big place, get out of your house. And if you can't do any of those things, just get into nature and see the harmony that is in nature. We see it over and over again. I live in southern Utah where we went through years of drought. And then all of a sudden we had a massive year of snow, and then waterfalls that weren't running for 5 years show up again. And then those waterfalls are going, and we see new life coming into areas of the desert that weren't there. And if we could emulate nature more as humans, I think we would thrive. We would thrive. Instead, we judge. It's like looking at trees don't judge each other. Be like, look at that pine tree over there. That's an ugly pine tree. You should be more like me. I'm a maple, whatever. They don't do that, right? They just say, thrive. Let's share space. Let's share light. Let's share nutrients. And I think that's really how we can thrive as a community, is realizing that, yes, we may be different, but really we're all the same.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Like, if the community doesn't fit, try another one. Like, keep trying until you find your community. And I think that's so important. And I think in that community, like you said, you have that support, but you also, I think there's hope, because you see people that are a little further down the journey than you, and you realize, wow, they were here. Okay, I can move forward. So there's community is so important. And I understand that you have a gift for our audience. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. I have it over here. I'll just kind of show it off, and I have it right here. So, well, I guess I could tell the small part of the story. So I have a bunch of meditations on an app called Insight Timer, and it's a free app. You can download it.
I love that one.
Yeah, I'm on there. And so I teach breathwork on there, and I teach live sessions and so forth. And a couple of years ago, I started doing kids meditations on there, and their breath meditations where they can do their breath. And actually, I guess I can show the audience here. So this is the proof of the book. So it's the SS meditation goes to the moon. And, they're just like, it takes people through, I'm so calm, and they do breath work together, and they take their cat to the moon. Anyway, so that's the book. And I kept making excuses, like we had talked about in the early part of this interview, about why I couldn't publish a book. I'm like, I've never written a kid's book before. I don't know any publishers. I'm not familiar how to write a book. I don't know any of these things. So after a meditation and some breath work, I received what I would call inspired action. And that just said, just do it. Just do it. There are so many resources out there. Just publish your book. Just do it. Just make it happen. And so I went into the marketplace of self-publishing. I said, I'm going to go ahead and do that. But I was a little bit attached to the end result of this kids book. So I said, I'm going to create 2 low content books so I can learn how to publish and understand the nuances of what bleed versus margin is, and what different colors and glossies and all that. I just wanted to learn what that meant. So I created 2 books. They're journals. Whoops, I lost my light there. I don't know why. They're journals, if you will. And these journals are like this one is one of them. This is the Psychedelic Trip Reporting and Journal. And then the one that I'm offering the audience is Breath Log and Journal. And these are daily pages for intention, for gratitude, and there's a quote in there, and you can document your daily breath work and your journaling, just little 5-minute breath work things. They're nothing all that difficult. At the very beginning, it talks about what inspired action is. And I also have a 30-day challenge in here, but inspired action, I can read part of it here, is an inner knowing that comes from deep within, beyond your thinking. And inspired action is when you do something because you feel strong urge to do it, like having a gut feeling. But it's not a small action step. It's a quantum leap towards your dreams. And that's really what me writing this book was all about, was taking this quantum leap towards my dreams of residual income, traveling, whatnot. And so I created these logs in a way to teach myself how to publish. And I have about 10 more of these children's books ready to go. But I'm going to send them out to a bunch of publishers, and hopefully somebody likes it so they can help me get the word out about these mindful children's books in the near future. But that's where these came from. So this is the book. It's 120 pages. It has daily quotes, and it has 2 30-day challenges, which is a great way for people to start a routine and hopefully maybe become a habit and then become a lifestyle change.
Fantastic. I love your journey there, and that you took kind of a, let's do these so that the one that I really want is the way I want it. How can they access the book?
Yeah, so right now it is available on Amazon. You can find it by just looking at my name. Just type in Ryan Bean, breath log and journal, or psychedelic trip report and journal. And the SS meditation series, which is this one, will be released. Well, I'm not sure, within a week or two. I'm waiting. So basically, this is the proof. I just gave them the go ahead on it, and usually I did a few notes in this and send it back to them, a few changes, and that's usually within a week or so. And then I will do kind of a soft release, probably in the first week of September. So those will be available on Amazon also. Just the SS meditation goes to the moon, and it'll be available. It's available on Kindle right now, but it'll be available in hardback and paperback within a couple weeks.
Nice. So when we launch this, it should be coming out. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Ryan. I know I learned a lot, and I really appreciate the time that you've taken to spend with us today.
Yeah, welcome. Thanks for bringing me on.
And I want to thank our audience for joining us. And if you haven't caught the other interviews that we've done, there's quite a few on a wide variety of topics around mindset, fitness, nutrition, community. And really, as I said, it's a wide variety of people that I've had come on for this. And they're here for you to help you learn and grow and explore what healthy living is going to look like for you. So thank you for joining me, and catch the other interviews. Have a great day.